All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to January 2022. This is the first nutrition presentation webinar of the new year, sponsored by the Healthy You team. And we are going to talk all about a year without dieting. And I know this month's goals is, or theme is setting new goals and kind of what all that looks like and how that works. And today I'm going to be talking about setting kind of health goals that have nothing to do with dieting or weight loss. So, my name's Kristen. Again, Happy New Year. I am your registered dietitian for Southern New Hampshire University, and I am a non diet dietitian. And we're going to talk more about kind of this framework and philosophy as we dive into this. But if you haven't tuned into one of these presentations or haven't met me before, this is a little bit of my background. So, I went to UNH and got my bachelor's of science in nutrition. After in order to become a dietitian, you have to do a supervised practice internship. So that's 1,200 hours. And I did that through UMass Amherst. I graduated in 2016. I also worked for a period of time as a personal trainer and as a clinical dietitian before landing at SNU with Sodexo as the campus dietitian in 2017. I am also a board certified specialist in sports dietetics, and I specialize in sports nutrition along with eating disorders, disordered eating, intuitive eating, and kind of creating a healthy relationship with food and body. So today we are going to be talking about goal setting and creating healthy habits that don't have to do with dieting. So we're going to talk about what dieting even is, why diets don't work, talking about weight loss and do you need to lose weight to be healthy? And then we'll talk about some health behaviors to encourage in the new year. As a standard disclaimer, all the information I provide is for educational purposes only. I am a registered dietitian, but I'm not your registered dietitian, unless we're working together. In that case, we have our own individualized plan. So just always like to throw that out there and know that these are great tips and education. And if you want to talk more one-on-one, I'm happy to do that. And my contact information will be at the end. Okay, so new year, new you. I know a lot of people think that like we have to make all these massive changes in the new year and this is the time for change and regrowth and all of that. And I do think the new year is a great time to reflect and kind of set new goals and think about what you want to embody in the new year. I think health promoting behaviors are great. However, not everyone has to engage in them. I think there's a lot of healthism going on in our country right now, and recognizing that just because somebody doesn't choose to engage in health promoting behaviors doesn't make them bad, doesn't make them wrong, recognizing that everybody has their own autonomy and can decide what they want to do. But if you are looking to improve your overall health, and that goes way beyond weight, looking more at mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, there's so much more to health than just weight. And we're going to talk about that and recognizing that weight often has little to do with our overall health and what that looks like. So before we dive in, and I mean, through this presentation, I really want everybody to think about setting a New Year's resolution to say no to diets. No dieting this year, no fad diets, no jumping on the bandwagon of the latest, greatest trend, saying no and focusing on yourself and what a healthy relationship with food and body and taking care of yourself actually looks like. So what is a diet? So my personal definition for a diet in terms of the like weight loss and restrictiveness means restrictive eating with the goal of intentional weight loss, restrictive eating for medical concerns, or restrictive eating in the name of health, quote unquote health. Now, I am not talking about a medical nutrition therapy diet that somebody needs to follow. That is not what we're covering today. So, of course, somebody who has celiac disease needs to follow a gluten-free diet. This is not the conversation that we're having. We're talking more about restrictive eating with the goal of trying to be quote unquote healthier, trying to lose weight, or even if you are diagnosed with a disease and or medical condition and think that you have to be extremely restrictive in order to kind of in terms with food in order to rectify that, which often is not the case. So when I talk about restriction, I am typically talking about less calorie intake in some way or cutting things out. So counting calories or macronutrients, kind of controlling those, eating only at certain times of the day. So not allowing yourself to eat before a certain time or after a certain time, cough, cough, intermittent fasting, cutting out specific foods or food groups. If you do not have a food allergy or intolerance to them, but cutting them out anyways, and ignoring internal cues for hunger, fullness, cravings, all of that kind of stuff, disregarding your own body's internal cues. So those are all kind of ways that people restrict, and we restrict throughout the world. So why do people diet? The number one reason I see people going on diets is due to body dissatisfaction and people being uncomfortable in their bodies, wanting to change the way they look, wanting to lose weight. So they think that we all hear calories in, calories out, just need to decrease food intake, increase exercise, and I'll lose weight and all is good and dandy. Typically, we see that's not the case, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Diets are also really trendy. So wanting to hop on the latest kind of trend and get the quick fix and do the quote unquote sexy thing. A lot of diets promise those really fast results, and you'll see certain individuals, celebrities, influencers kind of highlighting these a little bit more. People may diet because they're unhappy with their current food choices. Maybe they want to be healthier. And we're going to talk about what healthy actually means and how sometimes restricting food in the name of health can backfire. Longing for a sense of control and structure, or again, doctor prescribed. Maybe you got a diagnosis for prediabetes and the doctor said you have to stop eating all carbohydrates. There are lots of reasons, good or bad, that doctors make prescriptions when they might not be fully educated. So these are some of the reasons. And the biggest one we're going to focus on is the body dissatisfaction and weight loss, along with trying to be healthier. I think right now, like I mentioned, we have this healthified perspective in the US. And I think it's great that there has been more of a shift towards body acceptance and body diversity and recognizing that people come in all different shapes and sizes. However, there is a caveat to that, I feel, and that is, you can be at whatever body size is right to you as long as you're eating healthy. And as long as you're doing these XYZ right things, then it's fine. It doesn't matter. But if you're not eating healthy and you're not eating this kind of standard of healthy, what that really means, then your weight is wrong and you're wrong. So we need to kind of rectify that a little bit and dig a little deeper. So let's talk about diets. Now, when I think about diets, again, we're thinking about that restriction. And this could be any diet out there. So really all diets, in a sense, come back to that caloric restriction, and there is a calorie deficit. So that could be intermittent fasting. It could be keto. It could be Whole30. It could be vegan. It could be a host of different things. When it comes down to it, when a person is restricting a certain part of eating and they are paying more attention, typically calorie intake decreases. And with that kind of caloric deficit, the diet will work short term for weight loss. You might also have increased feelings of accomplishment and well-being initially. However, we know that these feelings don't last, and this weight loss doesn't last. Research shows that diets do not work long term. Normally greater than a year, maybe up to 5 years, you might see that weight loss. But for a majority of people, weight is regained within 2 to 5 years after the initial diet. What we do know, and this kind of statistic anywhere, and there's research articles at the end for where I got these statistics, but really the range is anywhere from 80 to 95% of people regain the weight that they lose. And we're going to talk about why, but that's a pretty startling statistic. People who do maintain weight loss from dieting often engage in pretty disordered eating techniques to keep the weight off. And this comes from the National Weight Loss Registry, which is a large registry of individuals who have successfully maintained their weight loss of greater than 10% body weight. And what we see with these people is that there often is quite disordered tendencies to, again, keep the weight off. So this is obsessively checking weight, excessive exercise, strict food monitoring, low calorie and low fat diets, etc. All of these things that they have to do in order to keep the weight off. And in my opinion, that doesn't sound like a great relationship with food or a great way to live. And probably they're not at a place where their body is actually comfortable if they have to engage in all of these strict tendencies in order to be at a certain weight. It doesn't feel right. So why don't diets work long term? typically a diet is quite unmaintainable. So it's too restrictive. It doesn't allow flexibility. It doesn't allow life circumstances. And it's just not maintainable. And a lot of the times we think, oh, it's our fault. We're too weak. We don't have the willpower. We don't have the dedication to the diet. Now, if we saw a statistic for let's say a health medication that was, hey, there's only it's an 85 to or an 80 to 95% fail rate, like we probably wouldn't take that medication. That doesn't sound extremely like reassuring that this is actually going to work. With dieting, it's the same thing. Like it's not very reliable. However, we often blame ourselves for the issue instead of blaming the diet. Now, another reason why diets don't typically work in terms of weight loss comes back a lot to the set point weight theory. And this is a theory that states that we are genetically predisposed to have a reference point around which the body tries to keep weight stable. So if we think about our genetics in terms of other factors, in terms of how tall we are, what our shoe size is, some people are tall, some people are short, some people have big feet, some people have small feet. We often don't think twice about this. Maybe there are some days that we wish we were taller or shorter. We wish we had a bigger shoe, or we wish we had different hair. But often we think it is what it is. Not much we can do. This is fine. This is what I was dealt. That is very similar with our weight. However, we are not given a specific number that our weight is automatically like, this is the magic number that is your genetic set point exactly. Rather, it's a range of around 10 to 20 pounds, which allows our bodies to change comfortably to reflect different life circumstances. We do have biological mechanisms in place to help maintain our set point weights, and these come back to our hunger and fullness cues, along with a lot of other like really complex metabolic pathways. But hunger and fullness is kind of those signals that allow us to tune in and respect what our body needs in terms of food and maintaining that metabolism. Oftentimes, if you are trying to get below your set point weight due to diet culture and wanting to be in a smaller body because those are idolized and said that those are the best, when your body might just not genetically be at that stick thin figure size, often the body is going to try and get back. So you'll see with diets and with weight loss, you might have weight loss for those initial 3 to 6 months, and then you might hit a plateau. And this is a common kind of thing that happens in diets. And they say, expect this, like your weight's going to plateau. We just got to pick things up more. We got to eat less, exercise more, stay committed. Whereas realistically, this is the body's way of getting back to a place that feels safe and getting back to a place that the body functions best at. So you might notice increased food cravings, increased hunger, increased thoughts about food, decreased just other activities, so non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That NEAT is essentially the activity you do outside of exercise, planned exercise during a day. So you might notice that you don't feel like you want to walk around as much. You're not doing extra chores. You're feeling more tired and not wanting to do extra things. That's the body's way of kind of preserving energy and getting back to its other place. So what are some risk factors for dieting? So again, we talked about the weight regain. So there are negative outcomes and consequences. So with weight loss, we do see that 80 to 95% of the time, weight is regained. And sometimes even more weight is regained as a protective mechanism. We see decreased metabolism. It can go as far as malnutrition, increased binging and purging and cravings. I'm sorry, not purging, but increases in binging, hopefully not purging, and cravings. Loss of muscular strength and endurance, fatigue, dizziness, loss of coordination, increased risk of developing an eating disorders. There is an 8-time increased risk of developing an eating disorder from dieting. Dieting is one of the leading predictors of eating disorder development. Decreased self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-trust. And now I know I'm not covering extremely deep on kind of the healthism aspect of this and thinking about healthy eating and wanting to diet to be healthier. But some of you may have heard the term orthorexia before, and that is a type of eating disorder. It is not in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual for mental health illnesses. However, it is a disorder that is gaining a lot of popularity and people who have it. And essentially, it is the obsession with healthy, clean eating. So taking that initial goal of maybe eating healthier and it ends up cutting out more foods, more restrictive, having this sense that there is going to be sickness or unhealthiness if you eat anything that is deemed unhealthy. So it takes that healthy eating out of control. And that might not be intentional, but that is something that could be triggered from a diet. So that's something to keep in mind. Now we can see kind of these outcomes of dieting in a very, very interesting experiment. So this is something called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, and it was conducted in World War II by Dr. Ansel Keys. And the main purpose of this was to try and see how bodies would react in starvation camps due to starvation. So trying to kind of research more about that. This study now, if we looked, is extremely unethical and would never be able to happen in our day and age, but it does give us some really, really interesting information and conclusions from what they found. So the subjects were men with superior mental and physical health. So they went in extremely healthy and good health men. The first 3 months, they ate regularly. So when they wanted, normal quantities, no restriction, just regular eating. The following 6 months, their calorie intake was cut in half into a semi-starvation state. And this is really important, this semi-starvation. So these men were still taking in, on average, 1,500 calories a day. And if we think about diets right now, the diets that we are, or not we, not me, the diets that are being prescribed are sometimes even less than that. We see all the time 1,200 calories. You can't go above that. 1,500 calories is what you want to aim for. These are things that happened to these men when they were still eating in that level. They were not extremely malnourished, but you can see what happens. So some effects, bar similarities to chronic dieting. Metabolic rate was decreased by 40%. There was food obsession. There were changes in their eating style, so taking longer to eat, trying to make meal times last a very long time, moving food around, chewing food for a long time, trying to make that eating experience as long as possible because they were restricted and wanting to make it last. There were more binge eating and bulimic tendencies. There was an increase in exercise to be able to consume more calories, and there were mood swings. All of this inadequate energy is a primal instinct to conserve and overeat. That's what happens. So when we're not eating enough, our body tries to make changes so it can conserve energy and slow down energy expenditure while getting more calories so it can get back to that homeostasis place. So the long-lasting impacts during the refeeding period, so after this time of semi-starvation, they were refed and there were increased hunger pangs. There was insatiable hunger. So this kind of increased metabolic tendencies that happened, their metabolism can be extra high. And we see this a lot in eating disorder recovery, where initially they are extremely hypermetabolic and need a lot more food than what is initially expected. Binge eating behaviors persisted. It took a majority 5 months to fully recover from this semi-starvation. And it's really important to recognize, I think most importantly, that this obsession with food that happened was not during a time that we have with our media and society right now. These experiences and these outcomes were triggered by biological instincts to survive. How do you think, and how do we think that the current impacts of our societal standards play a role now? There was not an obsession with health. There was not an obsession with thinness during this time period. This was all biological. So we can only imagine how all the societal pressures and standards that are in the US of diet culture and the thin ideal are impacting people's perception around food in their bodies. So now let's kind of shift into talking about what health actually is. So the determinants of health can be broken down into 5 different categories, and we're going to look at that in a moment. Recognizing that other factors play in a role of health instead of just our individual kind of behaviors. We have physical environment, medical care, genetics, biology, social circumstances. We're going to look at this in a second. Nutrition and exercise don't play as big of a role as we think. And we're going to see this chart in a second, but I think it's important to understand that as much as we think that we can control our health and we can control our health outcomes, and if we eat perfectly and we exercise enough, then we're going to be perfectly healthy. And that is not always the case. There are some factors that we just cannot control. So if we look at this model, and I know it's hard to see, but you can go to determinantsofhealth.org and kind of get a more up close view of this. But you'll see that our determinants of health, so the things that factors correlated to health outcomes are broken down into this pie chart. So 36% are our individual behaviors. So that might be things like our food intake, what we're choosing to eat, how we exercise, how we sleep. Do you smoke? Do you drink alcohol? Like all the things that you can individually control, 36%, not 100%, not 50%, not 75%, but 36%. 24% is our social circumstances. 22% is our genetics and biology. 11% is our access to medical care. And 7% is our physical environment. So lots more play into a role of our health than just our behaviors. So while health or while nutrition and exercise, those things might be very important, they're not the end all be all, and they don't matter as much as we may think they do. So now let's think about weight and health and how these kind of combine. I often hear people describe when I ask somebody, what does healthy mean to you? They say, oh, well, you have to be thin, like being thin, eating a lot of really healthy food, eating lots of fruits and vegetables, and exercising a lot. And it really, oftentimes when I dig deeper, it really comes back to weight. A person is healthy if they are thin and they are not overweight. I want to say right now that you cannot tell a person's health by their body size. It is impossible. There are people who live in larger bodies who are extremely healthy. There are people who live in small bodies who are very unhealthy. And what's really interesting is that when we look at BMI categories, and I hate BMI, I do not use it. I do not think it is a helpful indicator. It is a data point, but is not something that is the end all be all. So when we look at the BMI category with the lowest mortality rate, so rate of death, the overweight category has the lowest mortality rate. The BMI category with the highest mortality rate is underweight individuals. So people who are extremely thin and very underweight, those are the ones who have the highest risk of mortality. People who are overweight have the lowest risk. So that's really interesting. And we often call this the obesity paradigm. And well, it doesn't make sense. Why are people who are obese and overweight, why are they living longer? Why are they healthier in the long term? Because they have that extra support and they have that extra body weight. Let's say if you get sick and you go into a hospital and you get put on a vent, or you're not able to support yourself, your body has extra stores as a backup and safety mechanism. So something really interesting to consider. There's also, again, more to health than weight. So what are some other health behaviors and health indicators that we can look at that are not body weight? We can look at lab values. So viewing your cardiovascular health in terms of lipid panels. We can look at glucose and what your blood sugar levels are like, liver function, kidney function, your blood status. You can look at your vitamin D status. There are lots of different indicators of that internal health that gives us a much better picture than weight. We can look at mental health, social well-being, what the relationship is with food and body. These things all matter much more, in my opinion, than weight. And remember that body weight is an outcome. It is not a modifiable behavior. So when I work with people, I like to focus more on modifiable health behaviors, things that we actually do have control of. And if we want to make changes, we can. The only way, if I were to tell somebody, all right, you have to lose 5 pounds in the next week, the only way they can force and control that is if they were to cut off an arm. It's the only way. Weight is not something that we can control with utmost certainty. It is an outcome. And it's something that is highly, highly influenced. Next, I want to talk a little bit about health at every size. And health at every size is very misunderstood. I think a lot of the times people think health at every size means that you can be healthy at every size. And that is not what it means. Health at every size means that all individuals should have access and be able to engage in health promoting behaviors, no matter what their size is. And there are these 5 different kind of cornerstones of health at every size. So we have weight inclusivity, which is all about accepting and respecting the inherent diversity of body shapes and sizes and rejecting the idealization or pathologizing of specific weights. We have health enhancement, which is all about supporting health policies that improve and equalize access to information and services. We have eating for well-being, which is focusing on that intuitive eating philosophy and framework, which we're not going to dig into today, but something that I'm going to recommend. All about promoting flexible, individualized eating based on internal cues. So hunger, satiety, individual nutrition needs, pleasure, rather than the externally regulated eating plan that's focused on weight control. Respectful care. So acknowledging biases and working to end weight stigma, weight discrimination, and weight bias a lot of the times. And I never blame doctors. We are all, and myself included, were trained in a very weight-centric model, which means that for all of my education, I was always told that if you are overweight, you're unhealthy, and these people need to lose weight. We have to put them on diets. And that's just not true. We, again, know that diets don't work. We see the negative health consequences with dieting. And I ethically can't do that. I cannot ethically put someone on a diet knowing that they're likely going to regain all the weight and it's likely going to mess up their relationship with food and influence other health outcomes. So instead, we have to look beyond the number, beyond that number on the scale, and treat the human being for who they are and think about what things that we can do besides prescribing diets. Also engaging in life-enhancing movement, so supporting physical activities that allow people of all sizes, abilities, and interests to engage in enjoyable movement to the degree that which they choose. So again, these weight neutral health behaviors, eating for well-being, intuitive eating, and which is much more than tuning into hunger and fullness cues, but it is kind of the cornerstone. Gentle movement and physical activity that you enjoy, getting adequate sleep, managing stress, and accepting where your body lands. These are all overall behaviors that I encourage individuals to try and prioritize instead of all of these external fancy cues or fancy diets and whatnot in the industry. So let's talk about some alternative New Year's resolutions or goals. So if you are looking for new goals and goal setting, when it comes to creating lasting goals, we want to think about those SMART goals. So SMART goals, if you haven't heard, they are specific, they are measurable, they are actionable, they are realistic, and they're time bound. Some of these goals do not cover all of those. They're more of a starting place and you could get more specific. But these are a good place to start for goals that are not diet related. They are not weight loss related. They are things that are there to help emphasize health in maybe a different way of thinking. So one could be reading intuitive eating and completing the workbook. Make this more specific. I will read one chapter of intuitive eating each week and complete one chapter of the workbook, and I will get this done by X date. That is how you would make it more SMART, quote unquote. Eat at least 2 well-balanced meals each day and aiming for 3, aiming to get all 3, but recognizing not all meals are going to be perfectly balanced. So making sure you're giving your body the its specific needs of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, produce, sleeping 7 to 9 hours each night, stop negative self-talk and use positive affirmations. Like, I don't do that anymore. So I know I watched the Taylor Swift documentary a while back, and it was fantastic. She was in the car and she was looking at a photo that was posted from the media. And she was reflecting back on how in the past she would start nitpicking that. And she would, like, her gut reaction would be to start thinking negatively and pull apart all her body parts. But she sat there and said, nope, I don't do this anymore. That's not what I do. I'm going to put the phone away. I am not engaging with it. So recognize that while you may still have initial thoughts, we can't always control our initial thoughts, but we can control how we react and engage with those thoughts. So as much as we can, recognizing when negative self-talk is coming up and stopping it and using that, I don't do that anymore. I don't engage in those thoughts anymore. Other ones, drink X amount of ounces of water per day. A great starting place is taking your body weight and dividing it in half, and that's how many ounces. So if you, for simplicity's sake, weighed 200 pounds, you divide 200 in half, you have 100, you would drink 100 ounces of water a day, minimum. Spend X minutes per day or week engaging in a mindfulness-based activity. So meditation, coloring, journaling are all examples. Participate in blank minutes of movement I enjoy each day. Consume 3 to 5 servings of fruits and veggies each day. Yes, fruits and vegetables are healthy. Those are things that we do want to prioritize. In terms of thinking about nutrition, I like to kind of zoom out and consider gentle nutrition. So it does not have to be all or nothing. It does not have to be this perfectly healthful, only eating completely whole foods and no processed foods and all that kind of stuff all the time. We do know that eating fruits and vegetables are extremely helpful. These foods are linked to very positive health outcomes. So we do want to incorporate them, but it doesn't need to be strict. It doesn't need to be all or nothing. It can be, I eat healthy most of the time, or I eat healthfully some of the time. That is just okay, and that is perfect. Throw away the scale and stop weighing yourself, or stop weighing myself. These are the goals. So that could be a great one. No more checking the weight and instead focusing on how you're feeling mentally, physically, emotionally. Do one fun thing a week. I don't normally do. So get dinner with a friend, try a new hobby. That's something great that could get yourself outside of your comfort zone. Delete calorie counting app and use hunger and fullness scale before and after eating. So if you're looking for something still to kind of tune in and have some level of maybe monitoring that is a little more health promoting, I would recommend before and after eating on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being extremely, extremely full, 1 being absolutely starving, kind of using that and tuning in and saying, where am I before I eat? Where am I after I eat? Am I listening and trusting the signals that my body gives me? And finally, unfollow anyone on social media who makes me feel less than. Diversify my feed. So follow people of different body types, different colors, different sizes, different beliefs. So it's more realistic of what the world actually is. We have lots of different bodies out there. If you go in the grocery store, for example, you're not seeing just all thin white people. You're seeing different people in different shapes and different sizes. And especially if we look in different cultures, different body types are celebrated. People live comfortably and healthfully in all different types of bodies. So recognizing that and trying to give your brain the chance to see that more often. That is all I have. So thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I'll be back next month with another nutrition webinar based on the topic for Healthy You. If you ever need to contact me or want to set up a one-on-one individualized nutrition counseling session, you can email me at kristen.chulada@sodexo.com. I do work with SNU staff who live in either Massachusetts or New Hampshire. I do work one-on-one. So if you ever want to meet individually and talk more about your goals, feel free to email me. You can also follow me on Instagram. I am not super active. I used to be. Maybe in the new year, that will be one of my goals, is to kind of refocus on sharing great content for you guys. That can be some more inspiration about these messages and more. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.